So we are going to start with our guest. So I would like to welcome Jeremiah. So Jeremiah has been my colleague, and he has graciously coached and mentored me on how to do assessments. Nobody wants to know about how to do assessments, but he was very helpful in helping me learn how to do assessments as a social worker. So we spent lots of hours on the phone talking, and so I'm so excited. When we started, I connected with him and we started about talking about just this creating space. And I know it's such a thing, it's a struggle in my life. So I was so excited that he agreed to come and share with us. So Jeremiah is a registered professional counselor, and he's been counseling for over 10 years. Jeremiah has been producing positive counseling results with individuals, couples, families by restoring individual wholeness and relationship. And in his spare time, Jeremy enjoys developing meaningful relationships with his 5 children, an amazing wife, and his best friend. 5 children, yes. And his best friend for over 20 years. So he is, yeah, it's amazing. He is going to talk to us about creating space. So welcome, Jeremiah.
Thank you so much there. Good to see you again, Darlene, and Jennifer. Good to get to know you as well. Yeah, I was just thinking 5 kids. Yeah, I need some space. So I'm going to have to actually listen to what I talk about today so I can, apply it to my own life, right? I always say counselors, we got to practice what we preach, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just information and head knowledge. So definitely my hope is to begin to, talk about and share about some practical applications as well. Not just, that sounds good. How do I do it though? So hopefully we'll be able to create some space within that as well. I am so glad I did not hit the snooze more than 2 times today. Man, I'd have been fighting guilt right now and shame, but something in me was like, I got to get up. I got to get up. I can't. Now I know why. So it was funny. I was watching Darlene shot me the video going, hey, we're going to show this video. And I was watching and going, wow, I'm really, really glad now I didn't hit the snooze button more than twice.
Yeah, that was a very good video.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And it actually lines up with what we're going to be talking about today. And a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about with the Miracle Morning routine and stuff like that definitely fits part of it. I would say, if anything, before we get into the talking specific about creating space and then going into that, how do we implement that in our lives? Definitely, that's kind of been the mantra, I would say, for the last 3 months that I've been sharing and other individuals have been sharing. Of course, everyone kind of has, I call it the similar but different messages. And that is awesome because it allows everyone to relate what you may not relate to someone else, you relate to someone else. All right. And that's a good thing. Okay. So it's just a great opportunity to share. And within that came a concept that, I call basically creating space. And within that, this lines up beautifully, is creating routine. And out of creating routine, the whole goal of that is that we want to create normalcy within our life. And as everyone knows, whether it's pre-COVID, during COVID, or post-COVID, whatever happens in the next few months and beyond, there is a loss of normalcy that has happened within the majority, within the world, all right, lifestyle of how we do things, how we say things, how we do things, lineups, all these kind of things. And so with that, we want to make sure that we create normalcy within our life, because then that allows us to be calmer, to be more relaxed, to be safe, to be not as worried. All right. And that helps us with our anxiety. It helps us with our thought life, so we're not going to bed at night spinning around a mile a minute going, oh, what am I going to do about tomorrow? What am I going to do tomorrow? No. It doesn't matter. When you are in normalcy or living a life of normalcy, doesn't mean that life isn't tough. Doesn't mean that we don't have issues of grief and loss, tragic situations that happen in our life, whether it's in the past or present, but we're then able to cope through it more effectively and hopefully healthily. So let's start off with creating space. What is creating space? Well, the way I like to define creating space is it's a healthy way of dealing with life's sudden changes, which of course can include things like crisis, maybe a certain thing called COVID. You might have heard of that by now, right? Grief, loss, trauma, anxiety, depression, all of these things. All right. And it's not a matter, I always like to say, it's not a matter of if, but when a drastic life-changing event will happen that will throw a curveball in our pre-planned personal agendas. When that happens, that's when we end up in this place going, what am I going to do? I then lose my normalcy. I then lose my routine. And then I now lose my space and everything gets jumbled and mixed together. That's kind of what happened with COVID, right? The viewpoint I like to use is that everything here, whether things were good, whether you had challenges, whatever was happening in life out here just got compressed, all right, within the last 3 months. And that created a pressure cooker effect that all of a sudden it starts to build up the pressure, that's the big trend, right? In the last year is the hot pot cooker and all that kind of stuff. And if we don't release that valve to allow that steam to come out, boom, we're just going to explode. And then it becomes like a volcano effect, And I was like the joke, but you ever try to put your hand over a volcano and try to hold it down? Good luck. You're going to get burnt. You're going to lose your hand. Okay. So we got to allow that pressure to be released. And one of the ways we do that and start off is creating space. Now, the one thing I want to mention, this is not about social distancing. All right. Social distancing, I guess you could say, is a form of space, but that's not the space we're going to be talking about. We're talking about creating healthy space. All right. And even within social distancing, one of the areas we're going to hit on a little bit too is the area of social isolation. Social distancing does not mean that we become socially isolate, because isolation is unhealthy. And so we got to figure out within this area, this new frontier that is called social distancing, how to not isolate ourselves. Okay, and we'll get more into that as we go on in this discussion. So
that's a great point. I just love that differentiation between isolation and distancing, because I feel like when I hear distancing, it feels like it's isolation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we get confused sometimes. Oh, that means I just, I was walking, in the park, and traditionally, kind of from a cultural perspective, I was trained when you walk and go for a hike, people walk by, but you still look at them and you go, hey, you nod or you go, how's it going? I'll probably never, ever see that person again. But it's a social, cultural politeness, I would call it. But I have seen that completely disappear in the last couple months. It's almost like if I look, I'm going to give you something. And it's like, no. We got to break that. Again, it's that social distancing versus social isolation. I can still create and cause, and be, be honorable towards my fellow person that's around me. Be distant, but I don't have to be isolate towards them. So that means, even if I am in a mask, I can still, I was doing some physio the other day, and, of course we have to wear the mask and stuff like that. And even though I had the mask, the lady who was across the street, I looked at her across the room in the office. I looked at her and I saw the wrinkles of ice. She was smiling. I was smiling back. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, that's cool. Even with the mask on, I didn't have to be isolate and afraid. I was able to be open and vulnerable, even with a mask on. A little more challenging, obviously, but those are the things we're going to have to start working towards and increasing our skills in those areas to still be and demonstrate humanity and compassion and care towards each other. So one might go, why do I need space? All right. Well, specifically when we're talking about areas, when we use terms like trauma or grief and loss, global pandemic, COVID, they're just fancy ways of saying trauma, in my opinion. All right. We need to develop space in order to support living a healthy daily routine, which supports us leading, again, the outcome to normalcy within our life. Without normalcy and routine, we lose our freedom of control, which we are wired to have. And we're going to talk probably a little bit about control as we kind of go on with some of this stuff. So what does intentionally creating healthy space in my world of influence look like? Well, the way I like to use it, and the analogy I'm going to use, is think of a pie. Think of a nice, tasty apple pie. I was talking with a friend the other day, and he's like, no one makes a pie like my mom does. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to argue about your mom's pie. You don't mess with mama's apple pie, okay? If she makes a good pie, I'm not going to argue or complain. Like, no, you don't understand. My mom makes the best apple pie. I'm not saying that she doesn't. I get it. So out of that, I actually came up with this acronym for creating space today. And the acronym is actually PI. Okay. P is called personal. I stands for intimate, and E stands for energizing. So personal, intimate, and energizing. So what we want to do is when we're creating space, all right, we're going to subdivide and cut that pie up into 3 different parts, okay? The first part is creating personal space within my own life, okay? The next part is we want to create intimate space, and that's with my partner, my family, my children, my relationships, um, my relatives. We want to create space for those. The third thing then we want to do is then we want to create energizing. This is where the energizing comes in. We want to create energizing space in our career, in our workplace, in our job, the things that we do, you know, where we make money, you know, where we spend the most time with that way. Okay. And that also includes, hey, if someone's out there going, well, I'm unemployed, how does that work? Well, it just means that your new job is the job of finding a job, you know, or starting a business or starting, you know, that is where you have to create energizing space in that area. Okay. And within each of those, this is where I mean, to have one whole slice of pie, that's sometimes a little bit too much. And that's where we subdivide that into different areas of our life. So for example, when I talk about that intimate space, well, I've already started cutting into smaller pieces of the pie. My relationship with my partner, my spending time with my kids, you know, spending time with family, friends, those kind of things, whether it is personal or whether it's online. All those kind of opportunities that are out there that we did not have 100 years ago. You know, I'm going back in the way back in the days of the Spanish flu, you know, where I can't even imagine what that would have been like, being so isolated. You know, that's where at least we have this ability, the technology and medium, to be able to communicate in a way that allows us at least something that's better than nothing. Okay. But now, of course, now that we've entered into phase 2 and we're in, hopefully things are going to phase 3, you know, we're able to then actually, you know, you two are able to have a meeting like you're at, being beside each other, knowing each other's background and families, and okay, no one's got anything or caught anything, or it's over now. And so you're able to then do things in a healthier way. Okay. So that's where pie is: personal, intimate, and energizing. And out of that, this is then where we have to go, how do we create then space? What are we doing in between those spaces? Okay. And this is where we then go into that category of those things, like where you talked about routine, where we talked about mobility and all these different kind of things. And they are really kind of what I call the top 3 things that we want to do. And that's create routine and predictability. We next want to create mobility within our life. Out of that, we want to create connection. Okay. Now, there are like way more beyond that, but that's where we start entering into the other areas, you know, really of what is called in my world trauma-informed care. Okay. Or trauma counseling, you know, crisis counseling, the different terms that are out there. And that's where oftentimes, you know, if the first 3 is, if a person's having a hard enough time doing that, then that is where I would highly recommend. Maybe it's the time to be able to consider and go, all right, I think it's maybe time to have that courage to make that phone call and find that therapist, find that coach, find that spiritual mentor that's in your life that you know and can trust, and begin to be more vulnerable with, and to begin that conversation as to what that can look like. All right. To be able to go deeper into that, to help in the areas that maybe where that space has completely compressed into an unhealthy lifestyle, maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms. Of course, that's the typical drugs, alcohol. We, of course, it was kind of one of those, everyone, you know, my field sort of was worried about it and kind of predicted it 3 months back. But unfortunately, we are now seeing that compression of bad events that is compressed to an unhealthy point to now even more sadder stories of domestic violence in areas like that that are happening within households and stuff like that are now starting to come out. People are starting to unravel because they haven't created that space. And so now issues of anxiety and depression are now starting to dramatically increase as we see this. And just because things have opened up, in some regards, you could say, just because the government has opened up the cooking pot and went, psh, okay, phase one, psh, okay, phase two, there's still pressure that's built up that still needs to be released. And if not released and dealt with healthily, that's where we then end up with all these negative consequences, emotional and mental health issues that we're starting to now see increase.
That's
Yeah.
great. Can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
I think I can really relate to that pie. I love that pie, right? And sometimes it feels like our pie got smaller. But that pie, just those three personal spaces